Should I introduce myself? I am Robin Brande. I'm a young adult author, and I also write middle grade fiction. I'm also on the side a screenwriter, and I'm also on the side a wilderness first responder, which means that I am certified to fix you. If I find you in the back country and you've broken your leg, or you have an ice axe sticking out of your chest, or you're gushing blood out of your neck, none of which I would recommend, but if I found you that way, I am actually certified to fix you with sticks and duct tape and some of my saliva, which I first sterilize. It's very complicated. You really have to go through training. So that's what I am. Author, former trial attorney, which was a horrible job for me. We can talk about that if anybody wants to know. I've also been a black belt in karate and a yoga instructor. I was a community college instructor. I taught law at a community college. What else have I done? I was a Girl Scout leader. Maybe my favorite thing of all is I've been a state finalist spelling bee judge, which was probably one of the most stressful things I've ever done, because you don't want to hit the little dingy buzzer thing if saying that a kid is out unless you're absolutely sure. And so I had the biggest headache I've ever had after that competition because I was just so stressed out and just trying to get it right, but it was super fun. So spelling bee judge, that was probably the biggest bonus that's come out of me being a writer, is to get invited on gigs like that. Okay, that's what I have to say about myself. I would love to take your questions or your conversation. So whatever anybody has. Otherwise, I'll just keep babbling away, and that may or may not be okay. And I'm going to get a sip of water while you guys think. Okay. What is my writing process like? The first book I ever wrote, I worked on for 8 years. And I would write it and then send it out to agents and editors, and they would reject it and send it back. And so then I'd rewrite it and think, well, maybe people will like this, and I'd send it out again. And that went on for 8 long years. And then finally, I went to a writing workshop that completely changed my life. And I like to tell people about this in case you are stuck in a kind of rewriting the same book for years and years situation like I was. And what I learned at this writing conference was the two instructors sometimes wrote 6 to 8 books a year. And sometimes if they were feeling really spry, they would write 10 books a year. And I had never heard of anybody being able to do that mentally or physically. I just never knew you could write that much. And they sent us all away with the challenge of seeing for ourselves how quickly we could write a novel from start to finish, just to see what our particular rhythm is if we had no preconceptions about how long it should take to write a novel. So I left that workshop, came home, and wrote a brand new novel in 5 weeks, just start to finish, bam, blasted right through it. Then I took a couple weeks off, and then I started a new novel and wrote another one, bam, in 5 weeks. And that is, for me, what a comfortable pace is. The thing that takes me longest with a novel is doing all the research. So let me grab one of my books so you can see. This particular series, there you go, Parallelogram, deals with quantum physics and parallel universes and all sorts of really trippy science. And I was an English major in college. I have very little science background, and I had very little science interest. But now as an adult, I've become a total science geek. I just love it. I read everything I can about it. I'm just super into it. And so I only pick topics that I want to read a lot about, because that's how I like to spend months and months, is just reading books and claiming that it's part of my job. So for Parallelogram, I probably spent a year, I would say, really delving into quantum physics and trying to understand all the basics of that. And it's a series. There are currently 2 books out. Here's the second cover. I have a hard time. There we are. There's the second cover. The third one will be out this May. I'm working on it now, and the fourth will be out over the summer. And that's just been a really enjoyable series to work on, because I've gotten to spend as much time as I want, like I said, studying. But once I sit down to actually do the writing, I'll whip it out. I try to only take about 4 or 5 weeks, because I get bored if I don't just write really quickly. And maybe the best piece of advice I can get to give to beginning writers now is, if you're in school, especially, take a class on typing, on keyboarding, because it's a wonderful skill to have, to be able to type as quickly as you're seeing a book unfold in front of you like a movie. You just want to be able to keep up with your thoughts rather than always having to hunt and peck on the keyboard. Um, so that's what my writing process is. Lots and lots of research, and then when it's time, fill myself up on coffee and go. Okay, let me get some of your other questions. Um, Several of my books, this is from Houston Library, several of my books focus on influential science classes. What were your experiences with science classes as a teen? I felt really stupid about science. I didn't feel like I had any skill at it. And so my strategy was always to lie low, to pick as lab partners people who were really into science and really good at it, and just try to muddle through. I wish I had had some of the science teachers that I write about in my books. And one of the reasons I create those characters is it's kind of my fantasy world, that if I'd had maybe a science teacher like Ms. Shepherd in Evolution, Me, and Other Freaks of Nature, maybe that would have made me excited about science a lot earlier. In Fat Cat, there's a really cool idea at the beginning of the class in that the teacher has collected all during the year a bunch of photographs from various science magazines. And on the first day of class, the students have to come and just randomly pick a picture out of that pile and then come up with an idea for a science experiment out of that. And my secret hope is that there's some science teacher out there right now who will read the book and think that that's a really cool way to do a class and to do an experiment, and that someone will try it and that I'll hear about it. And the reason why I even came up with that idea is that I'm a huge fan of speed creativity competition shows. So I love Top Chef, Project Runway, even Sheer Genius, the haircutting one. But it's because I love to see people under pressure being able to do really creative work. That inspires me a lot. So I decided to come up with a science class that was like that too, that under pressure, without knowing ahead of time what picture you were going to pick, you had to decide in 1 hour what you could do as a science experiment. So that's where all that came from. Okay, Thrarin asks, how much of yourself do you put into your characters? Did you spend some time as a teen overweight like the narrator in Fat Cat? Oh yes, I was quite the chubette, Thrarin, in high school and college. And that is definitely what is behind the book Fat Cat. So much of Kat's thoughts in that book are my thoughts. I just was very sad and uncomfortable being as heavy as I was. Never had a boyfriend in high school or in college or my first 2.5 years of law school. Yeah. And so that's another thing I do in my books is I create male characters, boyfriends that, again, it's, working out my fantasy life, guys that I wish I had known in high school and maybe had as boyfriends. The other thing about Fat Cat is the way I even got the idea for that idea. So not just the science experiment, the Top Chef and all of those, but I was doing research for my first novel, Evolution, Me, and Other Freaks of Nature, and I was flipping through a National Geographic that had an article on the new species of sort of hominids that they had found, that they called the hobbits. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but anyway, I mean, we've all heard of hobbits from Lord of the Rings, but the race of skeletons that they found. Anyway, so I was flipping through that magazine and I came across a picture of cave people and a couple of men and a woman, just the way I described them in Fat Cat. And because I spent so many years as a fat girl, it's just the way my brain works now that when I see really fit, athletic women, I automatically do think, wow, I wonder what she eats. I wonder what her exercise routine is. And so here I found myself thinking that about this cave woman. And that's where the whole idea from the novel came immediately into my head, that what if there were a girl just like me who saw that picture and wondered, what does a cave woman eat? What was her physical endurance situation? And that she decides to make herself her own science experiment and live that way. So that's where all that came from. But yeah, I was a fatty. Thanks for asking. So are you this is Thrarin asking, are you a vegetarian as well or on a paleo diet? Well, this is interesting. When I first started writing Fat Cat, I was total carnivore, ate everything, including cookies, coffee, everything. And when I write a novel, I sort of do a method acting version of writing. I like to pretend I am my character and try to live what she's doing in the novel so that I can write about it accurately. So I put myself on the same kind of program as Kat. I gave up all sugar, which was horrible and miserable. The worst was giving up coffee. I don't even know how writers write without coffee. And that was the first thing that, by the way, when I was done with the novel, that was the first thing I got back on was make sure I had my coffee. But the more I did research into nutrition, nutrition and health, I ended up convincing myself that vegetarianism and even veganism, which is no meat, no cheese, no eggs, no dairy, none of that, it's just vegetables, grains, and beans, that was actually the healthiest thing for me. And so I started eating that way, and now it's been 4 years, and I still do eat that way. So I had no intention of having that be something Kat would explore in the novel. I certainly didn't think I would. But again, this is what I love about research is I just really get into it and I try to learn myself. And so that was kind of a surprise for me, but I like it. I feel really good that way. Okay, next question. I'm trying to catch up here. No. Okay. The other thing I'll say about the earlier question, oh, okay, well, I'll get to this. Houston Library asks, how does your background as a screenwriter affect your fiction writing? It's actually the other way around. Some writers are really excellent at description. One that comes to mind is Laini Taylor, whose new book, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, but her earlier books also, The Fairies of Dreamdark. And she's someone I know. She's a lovely person. I love Laini. But she is just the most gorgeous writer. She does great description, and I do not have that skill. What I enjoy writing is dialogue. I've always been really comfortable with it. When I was in junior high and high school, I was a theater geek, and I just am very comfortable in acting and dialogue. So I write within my comfort zone about that. And once I did that enough in my novels, I decided to branch out into screenwriting because that just feels like a natural fit for me. And I'm sorry, there's a little flea around my face that's been bothering me. I'm trying to ignore. So the things that I've done with my screenwriting, I've made the semifinals a couple times in the Sundance Screenwriters Lab competition, which is really fun. I'd like to win sometime because they have you come out to Utah and have people help you with your script. That would be fun. But the other thing that I do, and that comes up in was the basis of a competition that I talk about in, hold on, let me get my other book. My book, Dog Girl. There you go. There is a national competition called the 48-Hour Film Project that takes place all around the world, and teams from all around the world participate in this. I live in Arizona, but I'm part of a team that's mostly out of Washington, D.C., and it's people that I met just through the internet, through people who've read my books and liked what I did, and so asked me if I would be the screenwriter for their team. And I've done that now maybe 4 or 5 years. I can't remember. But the way it works is on a Friday night of the competition, it really is a 48-hour film project. So you have until Friday night to Sunday evening to write, produce, act in, put music to, everything, an 8-minute film. So on Friday night, all the teams go to the central location in their city, and there are certain plastic bins set up that have pieces of paper in it. And the team leader picks one piece of paper out of each bin. So one bin is the genre, so it might be horror film or musical or detective film or comedy, it could just be a lot of different choices. And you're stuck with whatever you pick. The next bin has a character you have to use in the film. The next one is a line of dialogue you have to use. And the last is a prop that you have to use. And so the team director picks all those and then calls me on his cell phone and whips them off as fast as he can. Okay, here's what your genre is, here's the line, blah, blah, blah. And we do a little brainstorming, and then I hang up and I write a script as fast as I can, and we bat it back and forth a few times. And I try to turn in the script to them by about midnight their time, because they start filming at 8 o'clock the next morning. And it's great because by the time the whole weekend's over, I get the immediate gratification of seeing a finished film from a script that I just wrote off the top of my head Friday night. And it's great. So our films have won audience favorite awards and other kinds of awards. It's just a really fun competition. And in the novel Dog Girl, I've turned that into a competition in high school plays, that it's a high school drama team that has 13 days to write, do costumes for, do sets for, and do all the acting for a play, a 90-minute play that they have to write. So that was really fun. Okay, my nose is running, and here's my question. Okay. Thraben wants to know, how much does music influence your writing, and what, if anything, do you tend to listen to? I can't listen to anything at all. I'm a one-track mind. I have to have it absolutely quiet while I write. But having said that, every time I write a book, I have a sort of romantic song that becomes my theme song for the book. So it can be like right now, I'm very into Taylor Swift. I think her videos are so romantic. I don't know. I get very inspired by watching the videos. I think she just does a great job with songwriting, song singing, and the videos that she does. So based on what the relationship is in the novel that I'm reading or whatever the themes are of the novel and what I'm listening to on the radio, I sort of pick my theme romantic song. And so when I want to get in the mood beforehand, before I even sit down to write, I'll listen to that song or watch the video for it over and over and over and over again and really get myself stoked for it. And then I have to turn that off and just be totally quiet because, like I said, when I write, it's like I'm watching the movie in front of my head and I'm just typing to keep up. So if I had also music in the background, it's just too much stimulation. My brain would be, ah. So I can only do kind of one thing at a time. All right, next question. Thraven says, that film competition sounds like a lot of fun if super stressful. You are correct on both counts. Sometimes it's easy, with the genre we pick, especially if it's comedy or buddy film or something. Those are easy for me. The year that we picked thriller that I direct, oh no, I'm horror. I'm sorry, horror was our genre. I'm kind of a happy Disney-like person. I don't watch horror films. I get too upset by them. And so it was so hard for me to write a horror film. I just couldn't get in the right frame of mind for it. That was just, that was a hard one to write. And so I don't even like that one best of all of them because it's just bad memory, the whole thing. Okay, Houston Library says, Teen Tech Week this year was Geek Out at your library. What do you like to geek out about? All right, are you ready? I got a list. Okay, I geek out about weird medical things. I love to read, there's a column in the New York Times that involves mysterious diagnoses where someone has come into the emergency room with all sorts of bizarre symptoms and nobody can figure out what it is. And so they'll do a whole case history of, why was this person regurgitating green things out of their mouth, and no one could figure it out. I'm really into kind of weird, gnarly medical things. I'm also into any weird science things. So like I said, quantum physics is really right up my alley. One of my favorite science books that I discovered as I was doing research for Parallelogram is a book called The Secret Life of Plants. And there are so many cool experiments that I had never heard of, and I don't even know if any of you guys have heard of. But experiments, for example, well, let me just tell you one of them. So there's a guy named Cleve Baxter who used to be an expert in polygraphing people for the FBI. So that's where you hook a little machine up to people and you're testing their stress levels and their sweat and all sorts of things. It's a lie detector. So he became very famous in the 1960s and 70s for training FBI and CIA agents of how to do lie detector tests properly on people. And so one night he was in his office and drinking a cup of coffee and just thinking about life. And he decided on a whim that he would hook his lie detector up to the plant he had in his office. And so he put the little electrodes on the leaves. And let me think what he did first. Okay, so the first thing he did was give the plant some water. And so he looked at the little gauge to see what reaction the plant had. And the way those work is when the person hooked up to the lie detector is under stress, the machine needle goes up. It just shows a real high pattern on the paper. If they're relaxed, it shows a nice, even kind of line. So he gave the plant some water, and he saw that the line actually dipped down, like the plant was very relaxed. Like, oh, thank you for the water, just very relaxed. And he thought, that's kind of interesting. So the next thing he did was he decided to dip one of the leaves in his hot cup of coffee and see if the plant would have any kind of reaction to that. And the plant actually seemed okay about that, didn't really have a reaction to it. And then Cleve had the thought, but he didn't do anything about it. He took no action. He just had the thought, I wonder what would happen if I burned one of the leaves. And suddenly the needle goes crazy, just, jumping all over the paper. The plant freaked out, and that was just at his thought. Okay? So from then on, he started doing all these experiments basically to show that plants in our vicinity can pick up on our thoughts and our emotions and have reactions to them. And he was so insecure about his results because it's very weird to think that plants would have any kind of emotion or any kind of stress reaction. He was so insecure about it, he started enlisting as many scientists as he met to come and duplicate his results and work with him on it. And so he invited in another scientist, I think it was a physicist, I can't remember which, but he had this scientist come in and do another experiment with him, which was to take an ordinary orange just out of the grocery store and put it on the ground, and then take an X-Acto knife, a really sharp knife, and hold it up high and drop it toward the orange on the ground. And they had the electrodes hooked up to both sides of the orange's skin. So what the register showed that is, as the knife was falling, the orange was totally freaking out. The needle was going, ah! He's like, the knife is coming in. And as soon as the knife missed the orange, the needle went back to being, oh, okay, we're fine. And they tried the experiment another couple of times, but because the orange by now knew that the people in their minds were saying, well, we're not really going to hit the orange. We don't want to hurt the orange never got stressed out like it did the first time. But again, the idea that a plant would react to danger or to your thoughts of, I'm going to drop a knife right now. Super freaky. So those are the kinds of things I geek out about. Okay. I need a sip of water while you type me another question because I'm talking a lot. Hold on. So, Houston Library wants to know, and this is an excellent question, do oranges fear being peeled? Well, think of me as a vegetarian, how I was not very happy to learn that plants would have fear or would feel pain about any of these things. And so there are another set of experiments carried out in India, where a lot of people are vegetarian, trying to see whether plants want to be eaten, whether they get upset about being, fruit being picked off the vine and being eaten and all of that. And again, these are not my experiments. These are things I've read, so you got to go with me on this. What they found was if your intentions are good, such as rather than me wanting to rip this plant apart just because I'm a horrible plant hater, if instead my attitude is, oh, what a beautiful fig off this fig tree, I'm going to eat that, everything's fine. The trees are fine. Oranges being peeled, what they showed in experiments were as long as your approach is a good and kind of loving attitude toward it, like orange, thanks a lot for letting me peel you, I'm going to eat you now, the orange was totally fine with it. Not making this up. Okay, here's a question from Thraben. Oh wait, first let's go back to Houston Library. Do you have any big science idols or icons? Why are they your favorite? I love Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is an astrophysicist and is the host of Nova Science Now. What I love about him is he's so into his subject and what he teaches, and he has made science interesting and fun. I love watching that program. I know it's geared for younger viewers, but it's completely up my alley because he's willing to be silly and weird, but also teach very hard science at a level where I can understand it and I know anybody could. So I love anybody who takes very complex subjects and makes them accessible to English majors like me and just the average person. And same with the physicist Brian Greene, who's done several NOVA specials. Again, his field is quantum physics and string theory. Couldn't be more difficult, but he has such a charming way and is such a great teacher. I love to listen to him, and I feel like I leave that program really understanding a hard concept. I've read his books too, love his books. It just so any scientist who is super smart but is able to talk to me like a regular person without having to be very erudite and use big words like erudite. Um, those are the science teachers or the scientists who really are my idols. And that's why I try to also put scientists like that in my books. And I hope one of the things I do in my books is take the really hard science that I've been learning and try to communicate it in an interesting, fun way so that other people can also be inspired to look into these things and geek out about them like I have. So I try to pass along that method of taking hard science and making it enjoyable and entertaining. Okay, Thrayryn asks me, your little trick with picking a certain song to associate with your novel and then listening before you want to write is a nice bit of personal conditioning. Do you have any other tricks? Well, I don't know if it's tricks, but one of the things that is really important to me to have a good writing day is I need to get plenty of exercise. So I always in the morning take a jog with my dog. I'll take another one in the afternoon with my dog. Sometimes you'd rather be sleeping. Too bad. If you're my dog, that's what you're doing. And what I find is that once I got over the embarrassment that I talk to myself as I'm walking along, I work out a lot of plot points as I walk, and I'm often speaking dialogue to myself. So I'm walking along having love scenes with myself sometimes, or funny little dialogue things. And if it's a really good scene that I'm writing as I walk along, I will actually call myself at home and leave myself a message where I'm dictating what this whole scene would sound like, because I'm afraid I'll forget it by the time I get home. So exercise is a really big part of it. The other thing, and this is just for any writers in the crowd, that I found very helpful in developing my style and my own voice and not trying to imitate other people is a practice that I learned about a long, long time ago, reading from a book I read by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way. And I know a lot of people in the creative arts have read her book, and it's just a wonderful book. But she has in there the concept of morning pages. And what morning pages are is every day without fail, you write 3 pages of loose leaf notebook paper. So the front and the back and the front of another one. So just 3 sides of paper. And it's whatever is on your mind. Or it can be, as simple as I'm giving this talk this afternoon, I need to go grocery shopping, just kind of a list of what I'm doing during the day. Or it can be ideas for stories, or it could be personal things like, I cannot believe that person said this to me, and in order to prevent punching them in the face, I'm going to write out all my feelings about them, whatever. What I found from doing my morning pages every day is it taught me to be very comfortable writing, period, and writing like myself, and writing in a way that comes directly from my brain onto the piece of paper. And the biggest benefit from doing that as a writer is that it takes the pressure off of my other writing, the writing that I do for work, for my novels, because I'm so used to putting my thoughts on paper and taking the pressure off of always having to be perfect or literary or profound, any of that, that by the time I sit down to work on a book, I've already talked like myself in the morning, and I've done it every single day. And so it just, I don't know, it's really been the biggest breakthrough I had in learning to write naturally, easily, and sort of get over myself. So that is a daily habit that I have that I think has really been helpful. So there you go, exercise and morning pages. Thraybin asks, isn't Brian Greene the cute young British one? He's not British, but he is for sure the cute one. He is super cute, and I even have a discussion of that in Fat Cat because that's me saying that. I just find him very handsome. What I also like about Brian Greene is that because he knew he wanted to be able to do presentations to people and maybe even do shows like he did for Nova, he actually took improvisation classes so that he could be a more comfortable public speaker. And what physicist do you know who takes improv classes? I just think that's very unusual. And I like that. I like anybody who is willing to say, yeah, this is what my job title is, but I'm interested in a lot of different things. And so I'm not embarrassed to go take an acting class or go take a class on fly fishing or whatever. It's just, I like people who have a lot of interests and who are willing to unashamedly go pursue them all, because I try to do that myself. All right, Houston Library says, you mentioned you were miserable as an attorney. Oh, thanks a lot for bringing that up. That's painful. What was so bad about that career choice? The thing that was bad, there's several things that were bad. One is that I went into it simply because I was afraid. I graduated with an English degree. I'd put myself through college and I knew I would have to support myself. And I just was afraid to try to be a writer. I was even afraid of becoming an English teacher. I just didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And so on a whim, I took the law school admissions test, the LSAT, to see how I would do, and I did well. And so I thought, all right, I guess I'll go to law school. So in a way, it was partially a way to delay the start of my real life, but it was also because I thought that would be a good way to support myself with an English degree. And so what I liked about law school and about the law was the intellectual challenge of it. I'm very glad that I have the training because it's made me, I think, very good in business. I really understand just the legalities of my rights and what I'm entitled to in the world. I like to understand how the world works. So I'm happy for the training. That was good for me. What didn't work was I don't really enjoy confrontation or fighting. And I was a trial attorney. So it wasn't even that I was just a transactions lawyer drawing up contracts in my office. I was having to go and fight with people every day. And there's only so long you can do that if that's not actually your nature. So I did that for as many years as I could take it. The one of the other benefits I got from being a lawyer is I'm actually married to one of my opponents. He was a trial lawyer on the other side of a case from me, and we met and fell in love and have been married for 20 years now. So if I had to go to law school to get my husband, I guess that's okay. At least that's what we say. Okay. Have Thrayren wants to know, have any of your books been banned in school libraries? What was or would be your reaction? Uh, they have not that I know of. I really thought that my first novel, Evolution, Me, and Other Freaks of Nature, might have troubles like that since it deals with, obviously, evolution and specifically the teaching of evolution in a high school. But as far as I know, that was never banned. And I've thought quite a lot. I mean, that's an interesting question because I was even just thinking about it this week. A writer friend of mine, Matt De La Pena, was in town in Tucson, where I live. And Tucson did ban, one of the high schools did ban one of Matt's books. And so Matt came out to give a talk to those students and just sort of rally his supporters. And his books are wonderful and should not be banned. They're just great. But it made me think, what would I do if I were in that situation? And I think again we go back to my basic personality that I don't enjoy confrontation, and I generally want people to do what they want to do and let me do what I want to do. Um, and so in some ways, I think a book banning sort of fans the flames and makes people think, well, what's that book about? If it's been banned, that's kind of interesting. I'm going to secretly go look at it. Um, but I also think that I don't know what. You know what? That's a really hard question. I'm just going to leave it with that's a hard question for me. I've thought about it and I don't have a great answer for myself personally, and so I really can't make up a good answer for you. But thank you for asking the question because it's been on my mind. Okay, Houston Library wants to know, who are some of your favorite authors and genres to read? My favorite authors of all time are Charles Dickens and J.K. Rowling. For the same reason, I think that they are both the utter masters at all elements of novel writing, from plot to dialogue to characterization. They can make us laugh and cry, and just whenever I want to give myself a tutorial in novel writing, those are the books I return to. I just learned so much from reading both of them. I think the last book in the Harry Potter series, book 7, was one of the best books ever written that I've ever read. So I love that. I loved the Hunger Games this year, really into that. Could not be more excited about the movie coming out next week, so I'm very into that. I love any writer who pushes me by letting me see what's possible in a novel, and that was definitely something Hunger Games did for me this year. Her choices were so bold and original, and I'm sure not popular with everybody, and I really respect that. I like a writer who says, well, no, this is the story I'm telling, and you can go with me, you can criticize it, but this is what I'm telling. And I like to learn from that because there are some stories of mine that I definitely think, I'm not sure what people would think of this, but that's the story I'm telling. So I like that. Some of my favorite authors when I was growing up and first dreamed about being a writer were Judy Blume, of course. I loved Beverly Cleary, and I was really into Encyclopedia Brown when I was a kid. And I even reread those books about 2 years ago because I have a series. In fact, let me grab the cover. This is a series. There we go. Secret Security Squad is the series. The first book is Operation Erase, and it's a middle grade series that I'm writing. And in some ways, it's sort of Encyclopedia Brown because it's smart kids and it's mysteries and it's them figuring out things that maybe the reader won't get right away, but they explain it. I just like smart kids. All of my books have smart kids either as the main character or as the side characters. It's fun for me to write because it challenges me mentally to try to write characters who I know sometimes are smarter than I am. Try to write that where a character is smarter than you are. But anyway, so as in preparation for writing the Secret Security Squad series, I reread Encyclopedia Brown, and I wasn't sure if they would still hold up or if I'd be like now thinking, those mysteries are so easy. I can't believe I was, so weak-brained back then. But they still stumped me. The books totally hold up, and I think there was only one mystery I could figure out now. I can't even remember why I know the answer now. But all the other ones, Encyclopedia, totally stumped me. He's just super smart, and those books are still completely enjoyable. Okay, Houston Library wants to know, what differences in writing do you find between writing the series books and the standalone novels? The standalone novels are sort of a refreshing thing for me because I know I'm in and I'm out. So I have an idea, I write it quickly, I sort of dip into all these characters' lives, and I can imagine what happens to all of them beyond the book, but I also just want the readers to make up their own story beyond that and think about, for them, what they think all those characters went on to do. And so there's a real pleasure in the standalone just because it feels like a speedy thing and just a quick little slice of life. And I don't know, that's just a fun experience for me. The series are, of course, a bigger mental challenge and commitment for me. And so I know when I've signed myself up for writing a series that it's going to span usually a year or two of writing to get them all out. And so that's a commitment, a time commitment. But what I like about writing series is I feel like I can settle in and really take my time telling as many aspects and nuances of this story as I want. So with Parallelogram, which we'll show again. Oops, sorry. Okay, so Parallelogram, when I first started writing this book, I thought it was going to be a standalone. My plan was just to get in and get out. But as I was writing that book, I realized the topic was so huge and the adventures that this girl would have. And what the basic premise of Parallelogram is there's a high school girl who's very good at physics who is able to discover something that no grown, adult physicist has been able to figure out still. And that is how to get into parallel universes. The theory's been out there for many years that there are parallel universes, but no scientist can figure out how to access those. So the main character in Parallelogram, a girl named Audie, does discover the secret of how to do that. And she goes into a parallel universe and finds a version of herself over there. But that version of herself is completely different from Audie. She's a famous girl adventurer, completely fearless, just lives in a totally different circumstance than our main girl Audie. So the fun of that novel for me is getting to explore Audie's life here in our world and Hallie's life over in the other world and how those two intersect and what would you do to try to become more like the cooler version of yourself. I like that mental idea for myself. I might have a vision of what I would like to be like. I wish I were cool in this list of 20 different ways. And then to take the next step and think, well, what do I need to do to be more like that person? What changes could I make right now? And so to write a long series, a 4-book series, where I get to fully explore that theme is really fun for me. I would not want to do that as a standalone novel. That would feel too short, too abrupt. I really enjoy also playing out the romance. There's a very complicated triangle in that book that will turn into actually a parallelogram, a four-sided romantic entanglement. And that's just really fun to spend as much time as I can. So what I'm doing right now is writing on the parallelogram series, taking a break, writing a standalone, then writing on the Secret Security Squad series, taking a break, writing a standalone. I'm just trying to mix it up for myself because it's hard to do it that way, and it's a mental challenge for me. As you can tell, since I've said that several times during this talk, I enjoy mental challenges. Okay, another question. Thraben wants to know, so who are your least favorite authors and why? Oh, I can't talk trash about other writers. Oh, you don't have to name names, I guess, if you'll describe what really ticks you off in a story. Okay, that I can do. Okay, I don't like stories that are, oh, okay, I can tell you exactly what I don't like. I don't like stories where the main characters are mean, bitchy girls, and that's a cool thing. There are some series that have as main characters mean, popular girls, and talk about the mean things they do to the unpopular girls who really want to be part of that group. That kind of story just bothers me. I don't enjoy mean girls in real life, and I certainly don't want to read about them. And I don't want to read anything that glorifies that kind of behavior. That really bugs me. I also don't like to read books that have gratuitous violence and sick things in them. I feel very protective of my mind. I don't drink alcohol. I don't take any drugs. I get a lot of sleep. I eat a good diet. And in part, it's because I want my mind to stay clear and healthy. And so if I go to that much trouble physically to keep my brain in good running order, I don't want to detract from that by feeding it ugly, disgusting material, whether it's in books or in movies or TV. So when I was younger, I used to watch, slasher movies and read who knows what, all sorts of disgusting books. But the older I've gotten, and especially as I've started writing books, I just find I don't want to put that stuff into my brain. It's just, I don't feel like it's good for me, and I don't feel like the writing that I do is benefited from having ugly things in my brain. So I'm just very careful about putting in smart things. I like to read smart books. I like to read books that challenge me and make me want to be a better person, a braver person. Hunger Games certainly made me want to be much more like Katniss. I like books like that inspire me, and that's what I try to do in my books. I try to pass that along because I feel like that's a real benefit that you can get from the entertainment industry in general, whether it's books, movies, video games, anything like that. I think it's good to feel inspired to be better than you are, to be a better version of yourself than maybe you are right now. And reading things involving meanness and pettiness and violence and all of that, where they're talked about in a way that makes it seem fun and interesting, I'm just not into that. So that's my general answer to that question. Houston Library wants to know, what can you tell us about your upcoming projects? What do we get to look forward to in the next novels? Well, here's a cover. My brand new book, as in out last week, is called Replay. And it is about reincarnation and near-death experiences. The main character is a girl who is a popular girl in her high school, a very good athlete, and she's having surgery on her leg after an injury, and she dies during surgery. And while she's dead for 42 seconds, she has an entire experience, a near-death experience, that when they bring her back to life has completely changed her outlook on what she should be doing, what her life is about. And the most mysterious part of that near-death experience is just as she was racing back into her body, as they were able to shock her heart and bring her back to life, as she's racing back into her body, she sees a vision of a face in front of hers, the face of a guy who goes to her high school, who she can't stand, who she's never had a single conversation with. And why would she see his face? And, why not the face of her sister who she loves, or her ex-boyfriend, or, somebody that she actually knows? And so right away she has this mysterious thing to unravel of, well, why him and what does that mean? And she has a very interesting journey figuring out what happened to her when she was dead, what does it mean, all that. So that's actually my new favorite book of mine. So let's show you the cover again, because it's my new favorite book of mine. Replay. There you go. And you'll see the Ace of Hearts on the front cover. That has a part to play. So I highly recommend that book because it's fun and it has a hot guy in it. And he is my favorite, I think, of all of my male characters. I'm not the only young adult author who's a grown woman who actually has crushes on my teenage romantic leads in my books. I'm not embarrassed about it very much. Okay, next question. Thraybran wants to know, how do you feel about the general field of YA literature these days and the pictures today's stories paint for young adults? What I like about the field of YA is the huge variety that I could read things about happy topics, sad topics, grim, gritty topics, whatever I want. And so I like that there's such a huge range of things that teenagers can read now. I certainly never had that range available to me when I was going to my library every week and stacking up armfuls of books. So I love that. And I also love that I write in one particular segment of that, and I'm totally happy to be in my one segment. And I am not against other people writing darker things or grittier things. I think there's a place for that too. It's not going to ever be my thing. Um, that wouldn't make me happy as a writer to write the darker side. But I understand the importance of it and the pleasure of it for a lot of people. Um, I'm a big fan of Meg Cabot, who also writes very fun, funny, uplifting kinds of books. And she had a blog post a couple of years ago that really nailed it for me. It was about why she writes funny books. And her answer was that when she was growing up as a teenager, her life at home was pretty miserable. There was alcoholism and just all sorts of problems. And for her, it would not have been an escape to read grim books involving, alcoholism and drug addiction and family problems and all that. She wanted to escape. She didn't want to dive deeper into that kind of topic. And so for her, she actually felt she was saved. She was saved by reading funny novels by other people. And so uh, she calls that genre, the darker genre, the trauma porn. And she doesn't like to read it. She doesn't like to write it. And that's how I feel about it, that I understand some people really enjoy reading that. It's not my thing and won't ever be. And I would prefer to write funny and sciency and all those kinds of things. But I think there's room for all of it. People should write what is comfortable for them, and people should read what's comfortable for them. I have no judgment about any of that. Houston Library wants to know, have you read Stephen Hawking's children's books co-authored with his daughter exploring physics? I have not. Okay, great. Thanks for showing up the hole in my education, but I have not read his. So they have not influenced my writing about science topics. I do read, there are a lot of science writers who, once I find them, I read everything they've written. And one of the guys I really like is Fred Alan Wolf, who is a physicist who's written really, really interesting books, including on parallel universes. I'm actually reading one of his right now as research for Parallelogram, dealing with time travel and how, under principles of quantum physics, you actually could have time travel. And so he has a whole complicated explanation for it, but in a way that's accessible to me. So I really like his books. I liked very much the autobiography of Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist I mentioned before. One of the things that's unusual about him is he's an African American, and when he was growing up, there were no black scientists whatsoever for him to use as role models. And he's said in interviews, you know, if I were as an 11-year-old boy was looking around to find some other black scientist to look up to, and that was the only way I was going to become an astrophysicist, it never would have happened. So he had his own idea about what he wanted to do with his life, thank goodness. But I know one of the things he's happy about is that for other kids, he can be that role model, you know, that there's the face of someone like them. I really like Brian Greene's books and the guys who wrote The Secret Life of Plants. So what I do is I find people who are writing in a way that I really love, and then I read, 10 books of theirs if they have them, or as many as they have. That's how I do it. Okay, Rin wants to know, as a geek, thank you, I am, are you heartened by the elevation of the community's geek celebrities, writers, scientists, etc.? Absolutely. Do you aspire to be a Neil Gaiman or a Neil deGrasse Tyson? In a way. What I feel like I represent is the English major kind of model of someone who really likes books and reading but doesn't have a specifically deep science background, but who has a real passion and interest for science. I feel like a lot of people are the way I was, insecure because they didn't have great math skills, weren't great at chemistry, um, physics seemed out of reach, all of that. And so because we didn't feel competent and didn't feel like we had the proper background, we dismissed the sciences as something we could ever even be interested in or involved in. Even if it sounded interesting, there's just that insecurity of, well, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I won't ever be able to play over there. And so I actually feel like when I give talks, one of the things, that's the group I can represent, is even if you don't feel like you're good at those things, don't just disregard science if it's something that you're actually interested in. There are ways of getting into it and around it without having to necessarily be able to do complex calculus and other math acrobatics, because I can't do that. So that's who I represent. So in a way, yes, I aspire to be that kind of a geek on behalf of secret science geeks who may not have the proper training. I say, let us rise up and be interested in science, and we'll find a way to understand it without the math. Houston Library wants to know, what technological breakthrough do you wish for most? Jetpacks, flying cars? Or something else entirely? I love technology and technological advances. I love anything that makes life easy and slick. So I'm sure robots of some kind to do something for me would be really nice. I've often thought having a house where you could push a button and everything, all the rugs come up off the floor and shake themselves, and the furniture shakes off all the dog hair. Those kinds of things would be interesting. The self-cleaning house, that could be fun. That would give me more time for writing. I'm sorry I don't have the imagination to answer this question right now. But I don't know. I don't have it. I've got nothing. Sorry. Okay, you're going to have to ask me another question while I get some water. And I don't think I would like a flying car. I think that would be too scary for me. I don't like speed very much. I like to feel my feet on the ground. I like to pound it out on the dirt. I'm not into hovering. I don't think I would like that. Okay, Houston Library says, do you have any inspirational advice for the aspiring geeks in the crowd? Yeah, here's my inspirational advice. I think that we're into a new era in our world, and I think that we're looking at the rise of smart. I think that there was a period of time that glorified averageness and made people feel embarrassed for being smart or intellectual or geeky, and I think that time is over. I think that it's the original and perhaps weird people who are coming up with exciting, innovative ideas. I think those are the people who are now admired, and that's what we are and should be encouraging. What I love about Stephen Jobs' story that he tells in his graduation speech to Stanford that he gave a few years back is he talks about, I mean, we know now from his biography and from other interviews that he was really involved in computers pretty early on, starting in high school and late in high school. And he went to college because his parents really wanted to see him going to college, but when he got there, he really didn't know what he wanted to do in college, and he felt bad about them wasting money on classes for him when he really didn't have a direction. So he dropped out of college, but then went back to maybe the community college, I'm not really clear about this, and took just classes that seemed interesting to him. And one of them was a class in calligraphy, which is that kind of fancy writing that people are able to practice and learn to do. And because he was just following what he was interested in, just geeking out about fancy handwriting, he says in that speech at Stanford that that's why computers have a choice of fonts. If he had never gotten into the idea of different kind of scripts, different kind of writing, he would not have given people an option of Times New Roman versus Calibri or any of those kinds of things. And Windows has the same thing, and he always claimed, I mean, there's a whole issue of did Windows steal everything from Apple? We're not going to go there. But I like that kind of thinking, that it's following what you're actually truly interested in and creating things that people don't even know they want yet. It's very easy to always try to play to the crowd and say, oh, well, people are saying they want vampire stories. I'm going to write another vampire story. Or people are really into werewolves. I'm all over the werewolf thing. I think it's better as a writer and just as a person out there in the world to instead follow what you're interested in and to create things that then people will look at that and go, oh, I didn't even know I wanted that. And back to the Hunger Games, I feel like that was really like that. There were no stories like that out there, but Suzanne Collins just followed the idea that she had, and now look at how many people are just crazy about that story, and there have been knockoffs of that story and all of that. But I just think that that's a better way and better for all of us in the future if people will respect their individuality and their own secret passions about perhaps weird things. And rather than, scoot that under the furniture, instead say, okay, you know what? I really am into one-legged fairy princess pirate stories, and I know there's none of them out there, but so what? I'm writing that. That's where my passion is, and people are going to love it. And so maybe it turns out they do. Or I really want a chair that has suction cups on the bottom so I can stick it to the wall. I feel it would be more comfortable sitting sideways on the wall. Whatever. Some person decides that would be their passion. And so they invent that, and I didn't even realize I wanted that chair until you made it. So I think that that's where we're going. The rise of smart. You heard it here first, maybe. Okay, next question. As we reach the end of the hour, do we? Okay, good. Any closing remarks before we part ways? Last words for the audience. Yeah. I think if you're an aspiring writer in the audience, you should know that this is the golden age for writers. I think that we have never had so many options for how to be published now and going into the future. In the last just year and a half, publishing has changed so much that you now no longer can only have to go through getting an agent, going through New York, doing it the old-fashioned way that was so discouraging for so many beginning writers. And I have loved the publishing experience I had through my publisher, Random House, but I've also really enjoyed exploring starting my own publishing company. I really, I mentioned at the beginning of the hour how much I like Taylor Swift videos and her songs, but I'm also really inspired by her business sense. I like that she decided at 16 that she was going to leave her record label and go do what she wanted, which was write her own songs, sing her own songs. The record label wanted her to sing other people's songs, and they wanted to develop her for a few more years. And she, at 16, was able to say, no, you know what? I think I'm developed. So I'm going to go do my own thing now. And now at 22, I just saw she is the highest paid musical act right now in the world, Taylor Swift. And she has decided that she wants to be in charge of everything, her own publicity, the way her videos are filmed, and all of that. And I just really admire that in someone at any age, but especially at 22. And so for writers, I want you to know that you have that same kind of freedom and independence now with things like e-readers and other publishing options. You can directly publish to readers and not have to go the old traditional route. In the same way, musicians now no longer need record labels. They can just upload their songs, sell them on iTunes. So it's a good time to be a writer, but that's a whole other story. Okay, I'd say that's the end of it. Thank you all for listening in. Thank you for your questions, and enjoy my books. Thanks.